Coming up on the Sky News Daily, how an unknown far-right candidate in Romania's upcoming presidential elections has rocketed to popularity thanks to TikTok. Stay there. Hi, I'm Matt Barbette, standing in for Neil on this episode. Now, this weekend, it is Romania's turn to vote. The country will choose its next president, and another far-right candidate has taken a shock lead in this race.
Yes, climate change exists, but is not the human being who can do that. But climate change is a natural matter.
Călin Georgescu is an unknown, independent, possibly anti-NATO, possibly pro-Russian candidate. In the first round of voting, Georgescu scored almost 4% more of the vote than his opposition, and they'll face off in the second and final poll this Sunday. The social media platform TikTok is credited with helping Georgescu to make those unexpected gains, becoming an effective way for the right to spread its message and sway voters' opinions. But he's also been accused of undeclared campaign spending and not labelling political advertising. So how has his TikTok account rocked the Romanian election? Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons is in the Romanian capital of Bucharest and has just sat down with Călin Georgescu for an interview. We'll play some of that in a moment. But first, I'm really keen to know, what's he like?
You know, he's a really relatively unassuming person. So we went out to just beyond the suburbs of Bucharest to a fairly nondescript potholed street. And then there was a house slightly sort of in the middle of nowhere, it felt like. In came Mr. Georgescu and we sat down and he answered quite a lot of our questions directly. He was very, very keen to say that he's a fan of Great Britain, that he lived in Bristol and Fort William,
wow,
among other places. In some ways, very polite, very unassuming. And then every now and then he would say something that would sort of catch your breath. And you remember that this is a guy who is portrayed as this sort of, nationalist, populist figure who probably here in Romania is arguably the most divisive figure they've had in civil society for decades. So for a man who came from nowhere, let's be honest, how many of us had ever heard of this guy just a matter of weeks ago, and he's now on the brink of becoming president. It is a remarkable story. But what I would say, he didn't fill the room. Sometimes you meet politicians, and whether it's Clinton or Blair or Donald Trump, or even Viktor Orban, and they've got this enormous personality. He doesn't have that yet, but he's got something very special because he seems to be mobilizing a vast number of voters around him.
Adam, let's hear some of your interview then with Călin Georgescu.
Do you have any links with Vladimir Putin or the Russian regime?
No, nothing. Zero.
What's your opinion of Mr. Putin?
I said also to many interviews, Vladimir Putin is in his country, is a leader, is a patriot, but I'm not a fan of Mr. Vladimir Putin. I take care about my people and Romania, and of course I shall take care about my country.
Also clarify, you said you didn't spend anything on your campaign.
Yes, and
the Secret
I had...
Service said you spent €1 million.
Yeah, it's their problem. It's not mine.
Which one is right? I mean, you said you spent nothing. They said you spent €1 million.
Yes, I have documents which they prove that, and I present also in the media, very transparent all the time. So they can do whatever they want, but...
You think the establishment is out to get you? Political establishment?
I told you exactly what I said. Yeah, the system is the last, as I told you, the last fortress of Soros has fallen. And this, of course, they made them desperate.
If Romania was not already a member of NATO and a member of the European Union, would you want to join?
I don't against NATO or European Union. It's fine. It's absolutely, how I can say, very good. The only point which I said many times, I have nothing to do with these two clubs. It's fine to be like this. Absolutely no problem. But the only point is we have to negotiate our interest. All the projects, for example, in the European Union have to support the sovereignty of the country. Each situation in NATO it's fine. If defense and if they take care about us, I'm okay. But I don't want to involve my country in a war.
As president, would you embrace gay rights in this country? Would you expand them or restrict them?
You know, each person is independent to do whatever he wants. So I shall be the guarantor. You can do whatever you want in your house or in your bed. I can guarantee that. It's totally free. The only thing I cannot accept to be a propaganda and to insist in the school to do something.
Very briefly, there's a few things that are always said about you. That you believe that fizzy drinks have nanobots in them, that you met an alien, that you think that the United Nations is linked to paedophilia, and that you don't believe in climate change. Which of those are true?
No. Look, the last one, if I can take this. Yes, climate change exists, but is not the human being who can do that. But climate change is a natural matter. Let's be very clear. But the science looks too close to the politics.
And do you believe in COVID?
I don't believe on that. Nobody have seen. Did you see the COVID?
Well, I've had COVID.
Look, no, did you see the...
did I see the virus?
The virus, yeah.
Well, it's microscopic, so no, I can't.
I don't know. Nobody have seen. But, you know, I'm confident in the immunity of what God made for us.
Will you stay on TikTok if you win the presidency? Will you stay?
You know what? I didn't use and I don't use myself TikTok. I have nothing to do with that. It's just the Romanian people which they support me even by this channel.
Was that a surprise to you that you have become a TikTok superstar?
The Romanian people, they decide to use that. So I don't know.
On paper, he seems like he's going to be an archetypal strongman leader. And of course, we're seeing more of those around the world at the moment, not least Donald Trump, strong women as well, Giorgia Meloni being one of those. But he's not like that in person then.
No, he's not. And in a funny way, I don't think he's got yet in his head the full policy framework that maybe others have got. So I asked him a lot about Ukraine to try and nail him down on what he thinks. And at one point he said, well, I don't know all the details. And you would think, well, you want to be the president of Romania, a country that borders Ukraine. You would imagine you would know all the details about this war. And there were almost sometimes, Matt, where it almost felt like he was going on almost a kind of spiritual talk about humanity, peace, what binds us all together. Now, you might say that's because he didn't really have an answer to the political dimension of it. But I mean, this is a guy who's got some pretty out there opinions. I don't think he is your archetypal strongman leader, but he's definitely from that camp of make insert name of country great again. And, Romania's for Romanians and that kind of stuff. Look, he is a populist. He's a nationalist. He's from that camp, and in many ways, he is a very far-right politician. But he's a bit out of the mould, I'd say.
Give us a sense of some of his views on things. He has a view on COVID-19 that is reminiscent of RFK Jr. in the States, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is Donald Trump's pick to run health in the US. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and also, Georgescu is a big fan of Robert Kennedy and has written the foreword for Robert Kennedy's book in its Romanian translation. There's been reports, we didn't get into them, that he said he's seen aliens. There are people who've spoken to him over the years and said that he's talked about nanobots being put into fizzy drinks. I mean, curious things. I mean, then there's slightly more worrying things, might be from a certain perspective, which is, for instance, I asked him about LGBT rights. He wants to bring in a law banning what he described as propaganda in schools. So he said, whatever you do in the privacy of your own home, behind closed doors, that's up to you, nothing to do with me. But I don't think we should have, quote, propaganda in schools. There'll be those who support that. But I mean, that is reminiscent of laws that have been passed in Hungary and Russia, which have been widely condemned as being highly discriminatory and oppressive towards the LGBT community. So I think some of the things he says are setting alarm bells ringing, certainly here in Romania. Other things will just be seen as being, wow, pretty left field.
One of the things we know he said before was he's certainly shown a fondness and an admiration for Vladimir Putin. Did that crop up?
The impression I get is that he is now desperately trying to put distance between himself and Vladimir Putin because of all these allegations that effectively Russian bots on TikTok did such an enormous job of trying to magnify his appeal there. So, and I think also, quite clearly, Russia has invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is a neighbor to Romania. In the real world, no Romanian wants the Russian army sort of pouring across Ukraine. But Matt, you're right. There are plenty of people here in Romania who think, well, don't believe that, who think that he is an admirer of Putin, that he's modeled himself on Vladimir Putin, that you look at some of the social media, well, there's, here is Georgescu doing very Putin-esque things, all but sort of wrestling a bear. And so I think those questions will linger over him, even though, to me, categorically said, I am not a fan of Putin.
Welcome back. Anda Soila is a lecturer in cybercrime at the University of Portsmouth. She's Romanian as well, and she has written about Călin Georgescu and how he has seemed to have manipulated TikTok to rise to the top in Romania's presidential election. How did Călin Georgescu become so influential so quickly on social media?
The way he presents himself is very appealing to the people, so always in a sharp suit, speaking very clearly. And we can see a lot of these sort of like portrayal, right? We see he said that he spent zero money on his campaign, and what we see in his campaigns is that it's kind of copying the style of other social media influencers. Particularly, like what brings me to mind is like the manosphere influencers, like kind of like Andrew Tate type of thing. He says his point of view, like this point of view or the opinion he has is kind of shocking at times, so it brings more engagement. And also the other videos that he posts, like going to the church. The Christian Orthodox Church is quite a big thing in Romania, so associating himself with traditional values there. Again, we see this intersection with the manosphere influencers and sort of podcasters as well in doing sports. He has gone to many podcasts and has many clips proliferated online, I think, to spread his message, right? On many podcasts, many talk shows. And we also have seen this in the US with the campaigns, right? With Trump going on all these different sort of podcasts and spaces to kind of spread the information about his campaign.
What's different about Georgescu's style is he's not particularly animated. He looks calm, collected. There's no shouting. There's no gesticulating with his hands. It's almost like he's preaching, but he's not getting angry. He doesn't look hugely passionate, I have to say.
And I think what's important is that he picks some issues that are issues that Romanians are facing. So we have the economical issues, the fear with the war in, Ukraine, because he's a populist, right? He's saying what people might want to hear, sort of thing, that he's going to improve the economy by nationalizing outside, like external businesses, or that the war in Ukraine needs to end because this is not a matter of Romanians, he's saying, right? So he's playing a lot on that Romanian identity. We need to care about our country, not about what other people are doing. We need our diaspora, so the Romanians abroad, to come back home. And he's focusing on these issues that are salient, right? And that are problems for Romanians, but he's not necessarily providing useful solutions.
Look, he's spoken fondly in the past of Vladimir Putin, which brings about my final question. Do you think there's been, in some ways, foreign Russian involvement in this social media? Do you think it's being manipulated? Because look, we've seen that elsewhere. We know about that. It's a risk to our democracy here in Britain, according to the authorities in the UK as well. Do you think that's happening here with Georgescu's campaign?
It cannot be 100% proven, but this is another main aspect of the possible, and as the authorities that have released documents related to the election investigation have alleged that it's a Russian interference. So we have hybrid cyber warfare alleged being from Russia, and this would be information warfare. So kind of like the popularization of these views and accounts and followers to come from like an external state and organization. And then we also have the cyber attacks, where there were, I think, 85,000 attempts to sort of hack into Romanian government websites and access electoral data. Again, it's not 100% sure it's Russia. It has not been identified. This is being under investigation. At this point, you could say that it's very possible, as you said, that Russia would be engaged in such a thing, as it's been proven in the 2019 Ukraine elections, right? You had, again, hybrid cyber warfare against Ukraine during their elections, and then also in Moldova, right? The elections that happened just, a few weeks ago.
One unusual thing that we keep hearing about regarding Călin Georgescu's use of TikTok is this sound signature that's been used in a lot of his videos and reshared.
It's quite interesting because it kind of sounds like a national song, like a national hymn. And also what they're saying in there, again, is like saying that he's going to save Romania, that he's the chosen president. And as you said, it's been used by people spreading this sort of misinformation about Călin Georgescu being the one that's going to save us.
It's like a national anthem kind of thing, but instead they're singing about him rather than the country.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't copy the music of our national anthem, but it sounds similar to the national anthem. So it kind of creates a sense of like patriotism in a way, because it's so similar to a national anthem.
And thank you very much indeed for that. So what might be the consequences if Georgescu wins the election on Sunday? Let's go back to Adam, who's still with me now. He won the first round, so if he does go ahead to win the whole thing come Sunday, what kind of country under President Călin Georgescu will Romania become? And what does it mean for their allies? What does it mean for NATO?
Well, I think the first thing to say also is that the president doesn't have a huge power. This is a parliamentary democracy. It's a sort of semi-presidential. But the president does have powers to oversee foreign policy. Interesting. They also represent Romania at the European Union. And actually, that gives you plenty of power. And when I spoke to him, and I said, look, this is a very fractured company. A lot of political parties have united, but they wouldn't normally, just to try and stop you. And he said, well, yeah, but I'm an independent. He said, my party is just the Romanian people. So after I've won this election, he's very confident he's going to win. Then he thinks that he can be a unifying voice. Now, how many times have we heard that from people saying, I'll be the president/prime minister for all the people? Donald Trump said it in his first term, and I don't think anybody believes that he necessarily sort of went down that road. But he will have ramification. I would say that there are two things. One is, for instance, that power over foreign policy, that power over shaping debate at the European Union, probably also about developing closer ties, certainly with Hungary, who's a big admirer of Viktor Orban, and probably with other sort of populist nationalist leaders, of whom there are a growing number in Europe. But the second thing is, obviously, he's going to shape political discourse here. And the fact is, if he wins this presidential election with the numbers that are being spoken about, 63% in one poll, others saying it could be up to 70%, you can't write that off. That means something is happening in Romania. And that is probably down to disaffection with the political establishment. And he himself, Georgescu, made a point of that. He thinks that this is all about the political establishment trying to stop him because he is the voice that is effectively calling them out. But what is clear is that if he wins this election, having been a nobody in the political scene relatively recently, you can't just sit back and say, well, something's gone wrong. You, me, everyone, the Romanians, and I think the EU are going to have to say, what do we read into this? Why is there this disaffection with mainstream politics?
The tropes are familiar, but also becoming very familiar this year is voters punishing the incumbents, and it certainly seems that in Romania that could happen once more. Adam, thank you very much. You can watch Adam's full interview with Romania's Călin Georgescu on skynews.com. But that's all for today here on the podcast. Back again tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.